So each one of you is a participant in our SARE grant study using sorghum with companion crops. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So Justin, why don't you start off by telling us what intrigued you about doing this and what you've seen so far on your field.
I wanted to participate in this project first and foremost for learning, obviously. The thing specifically I was interested in learning about was how can we continue to hear this message about, continue to hear this message from people that I respect, that we need to add more diversity in our system and mimic the prairie system, and as we work to regenerate the soils and resources that we work with daily, diversity is a big part of that. So how can we add diversity into a monoculture cropping system, and intercropping is an opportunity to do so. I've never experimented with it before, so I wanted to learn just how it would work and observe it. That's a lot of how we learn through farming. It's just trial and error and observation during the process. So I wanted to learn, see about the diversity and how we can add that, and then add weed competition. We're all battling, increasingly so difficult to control weeds, and having diversity and more canopy within our crop I was hoping would help control some of those weeds without relying as much on herbicide for control. So adding another way to control weeds outside of relying on herbicides. Some of the things I have noticed or observed is just the diversity. We got 4 out of the 5 species, or 5 out of the 6 species established in our field, and they grew, and the field still looks like a milo field, though it wasn't a train wreck. We have a few weeds that escaped because we didn't use any herbicide at my location after planting, so no residuals, so we had a few escapes, but it wasn't a nightmare like I thought it possibly could be, because I didn't know. I haven't tried this before. So I'm encouraged by how the intercrop plants grew and utilized the whole canopy, both vertically and horizontally, capturing sunlight, how they're shading the ground more, the diversity that we're adding to the system and our soils. And I'm interested to, I think it's been a success enough. We're not to harvest yet, but I'm interested to learn, to continue to learn.
Doug, so you decided that you would actually put your companions between your rows of sorghum. Tell us why you made that decision versus putting it in with the sorghum.
In my case, when we all visited about this, I decided to put my companion crop between the rows. I'm using an air seeder to seed the sorghum in 10-inch spacing, but then I put sorghum seed in every other row, so 20-inch sorghum, and decided to switch it up a little and put the cover or the companions between the rows. I had the ability to do that because of the multiple tanks on the air seeder, and just get a little different look at that and see how the light interception was maybe different than putting them right with the seed. So unfortunately, in my case, as we're trying to learn in this grant how to mix what we're currently doing with herbicides versus the intercropping, I chose to continue the herbicide program I have had, see what the effects would be, and in my case, of course,
Lance, you live in the driest portion of the state, and talk about how you've been able to adapt to what are typically dry conditions in your area, but yet you still feel comfortable doing a project like this.
Yeah, I think, it was 2 years ago when Jimmy Emmons did it down in his place, and he's kind of the first one to try to do this, and I thought, if he can do it in his dry, arid conditions, then I think that's something I'd like to be a part of, and to, instead of one person doing it, can we get more people doing it? And so then as we're doing that, the concern wasn't, I think we had the right species. I felt that we weren't going to lose much on moisture if we had a drying. It wasn't going to affect us financially. It's just if they could grow in this condition, if it gets dry, if it stays dry, is there going to be a yield hit or not? I wasn't too concerned about that, but I think it's kind of like what's been said already about is it going to be a competition or is it going to be beneficial? And right now, you know, we're trying to figure out the herbicide and what we're going to do on that, how that's going to work, whether you don't put herbicide out and you get a good stand, but if the compete against weeds, it's going to be financially hurting. But also if you spray and then also you have no companions with it, then yeah, you're not benefiting from that either. So it's gonna...
Keith, you planted into a very tall story cover crop when you put your companions in with your sorghum. Tell us a little bit about how you have seen your soils adjust and been able to make that work with such a high carbon load before you plant.
Now this rye was pretty thick. We've done this with soybeans. I've never done it with milo before, so I wondered how that would work. And got a perfect stand of everything. Chemicals controlled what was growing there, and did. I didn't see anything, the chemicals bothering the companions. What really happened for me, because Lance shifted his dry weather over to me this year, and as the year has gone on, I've seen the companions just get less and less. They just couldn't compete with no moisture at the milo out. It was just out competing them. Another thing is I didn't put any fertilizer on at all. Wanted to see how that would work. I did put fertilizer on outside the plot, like we do. Everything was the exact same without the companion. But when we planted the plot, no fertilizer, and it's looked different. It has a more of a lime green look to it. At first I thought, wow, I wish I'd put some fertilizer on. But as we have gone into this dry weather, the companions are where the no fertilizer. That milo is actually looking a little better. And I had a little shower last night, so I'm curious to see what's going to happen. It was actually, I have pictures, it's headed out and the other's not. And it looks like it wouldn't have headed out in the end of rain. So I was kind of, and another thing I'd seen that some other people, we did some companion in sunflowers for 2 years in a row. And I've seen so much more insects in there. So that was another thing I wanted to see if it would keep insects and disease down, because it was in Ireland last year where guys were putting some companions in to the row. There would be no diseases where they had the companions, where they had the monoculture. And it was, and over there they were really fighting fungal diseases, bugs, and the slugs. They have a slug problem, and there was no slug damage on their cash crop. So those sort of things intrigue me too, to see if we could see the same thing in Kansas.
Sure. So, Doug, we've done this in somewhat of in a response to a sugarcane aphid problem that happened now 3 growing seasons ago. But this has been one strategy that has been employed to maybe keep input costs down and not have to spray for these sugarcane aphids. Do you see that concept of companions attracting beneficial insects, that it could be applicable in other crops?
Yeah, I think the more we study and look at that association, I certainly don't claim to be an entomologist, but I trust those who understand that system, and they've suggested that there certainly could be some benefit from that. I think that's really what we're trying to do here. The mix we have has several different species in it with kind of different flowering dates and different colors to attract different insects. And I think today in the field we observed some of those that perhaps could be beneficial if we get an infestation of sugarcane aphids. And I think that concept can be moved and transplanted into other scenarios where we could have some value there as well. So I think hopefully this idea and concept can be understood in other scenarios or avenues of what we're doing. Yeah, absolutely.
Justin, we have visited another one of your fields today that you had planted cover crops in behind your wheat, and curious what you see in the future in the way of using, like you had mentioned before, diversity within your cropping system, and what you hope that's going to achieve for you.
I hope it makes my soils and my overall cropping system more resilient, bottom line. That's the bottom line. I want to rely less on spraying during a fallow period after wheat harvest with some of these real difficult pigweed and palmer amaranth species that are challenging us. So I want to just fill those spaces where I don't have things growing with diversity, but yet do it in a way that do it in a way that's economically sustainable as well, and just trying to find that balance is my goal.
Lance, you're in an area that's a very traditional farming part of our state, and I'm curious how you interact with your neighbors, the folks you go to church with, the folks that you socialize with, and how they react to the changes that you've made in your farming production system over the last 8 years.
Yeah, so, interaction is, you visit with some neighbors that are curious of what you're doing. Others watch what you're doing, and then you can see that they sometimes make changes. We were one of the first ones to go 100% no-till, and I know for the first 3 or 4 years, no one had done that. Now there's several no-till drills. We've been the first ones to do cover crops. We've been obviously the first ones to do sorghum-companions and milo. But people watch, they see what's going on, but they may not come up and ask, but you can see that there is a change, a slow change, but they will, if they see the good or the bad side of it, they may ask you a little bit more. And I think with any of us, we're at the tip of the spear on some of this stuff that we're trying to make a good change for the better for generations to come, and like Justin said, making things resilient. And we may not make the right decisions at times, and the weather may not be good for us but most years, but hopefully we make those right decisions and we can help our neighbors make the right changes that we see.
Keith, you've always, for the last 25 years, tried to do something just a little different, and really people look to you to be the person who's going to try something and experiment. Tell us what's next. You had mentioned perennial pastures as one of the things that you've been trying here recently. Is that something that you've had some success with, and how are you planning to tweak that?
Well, one of the things that happened this year we had no plan on is because of the dry weather, I guess. A lot of things didn't grow normal, but the alfalfa really grew, and it went to seed. And I was looking at that and like, wow, what if we could harvest that? And I bought a shell-borne stripper header, and we've been out stripping the alfalfa out in there and leaving all the grass and everything, and just, so we're pretty excited about that, how that's going to turn out. It's really helped. One of the things, this is our second field that we did the perennials on, and the first year I kept track of what was going on as we went out of the perennial to crops, and on a kind of an average, I look back at all the cropping years we've had, and on the average, the crops that I have grown has been about between 30 and 40% higher yield than any time in the history of that farm, and within 10% of the highest. It was 10% higher than any of the highest yields I've ever had, which to me is unbelievable. And I think it's what I'm seeing is that carbon for 3 years. We just did 3 years the first time. This next one I'm going to go 4. I think we're putting the carbon back into the soil, changing the soil structure. You see the difference in resilience Even this year, the soybeans on that field are not showing drought stress at all. So I'm expecting the same difference in yield. And this was soybeans, corn, and milo, so it's looked at 3 different crops. And it's happened every time. So I'm like pretty excited about this, what I'm seeing with this. And then grazing cattle, and that adds another dimension. It's not something every farmer has to do, but I think it's one of those steps that you can no-till, and then you can add some diversity, and you can start throwing in covers and cattle, and each one of those adds some, or livestock adds something. And this is something I didn't think we'd see this.
So going back to our project here, and this will be a question for all of you. Think about, we're midway to harvest here now, and you've had a chance to see it's beginning to make grain, and soon we'll get to harvest that grain. With what you know now, what would you change? What have you learned that you would change? And what do you think might be an impediment to others adopting something like this that we need to think about and give some more direction to get this type of system more widely adopted?
The thing I would change is I would have planted a fall cover crop ahead of this project, similar to what Keith had his rye out there. The weeds, the biggest problems that we had with weeds were the weeds that were emerging at the same time that the grain sorghum and the intercrop species were emerging. Those the one, or shortly thereafter. And I think had I had a more of a thicker canopy of cover like Keith had, perhaps I would have had less of those weeds emerging maybe. So that's something that I would change to try to improve our success. And then I think a real challenge is this herbicide question, is where's the balance between sacrificing some of our weed control through herbicide versus having some weeds out there, and how can we allow these intercrops to do what they need to do, but yet not have these really detrimental, harmful weeds compete with our crop and our intercrop species and make seed for years to come.
Yeah, I think Justin kind of nailed it there. Of course, in my case, we certainly learned that the full rate of application of herbicide I used was too much. Certainly in my case, wish that I hadn't have done that, or we'd step back, but I think we need to find, just like Justin said, find that balance of where that is, and help educate and understand how to help other producers understand where that balance is between managing the undesirables and allowing the beneficials or the intercrops to really do what it is they're designed here to do. So I think finding that, so I guess I'd certainly love to have an opportunity to do it again, and likely will again next year, even on my own if necessary.
Same as we talked about, I think trying to grow a cover that would give more residue going into the season, and then try to find that balance at what chemical will hold back pigweeds, but also, if you don't, on our fields we don't have a grass problem, so is it a pigweed problem? And so can we focus in on where the pigweed, get the best chemical from pigweed, but then also is that going to take out, maybe study a little bit more what maybe work and what won't work, and see if that's going to work with the milo and companions. The other thing I looked at also is, like for our field, where we did get some hail and it's heading out now, and I think it's still going to make very good milo, but trying to keep the gaps, something filled in the gaps, so we don't have any sunlight hitting the soil, making sure that, like in Justin's case, a lot of stuff is already got good cover, and it's from a companion, and looking at that, trying to make sure that it's going to be, there's no sunlight hitting the ground, and that's what I'd like to do.
One of the things I'm thinking about is seeding some cover crops in the spring, because there's a lot of things I plant in the fall, but if you plant those in the fall, they won't make it through the winter. So I'm gonna look at another seeding pass. Just, I think I'm not getting enough diversity in my covers, I know that. Another thing is, Lance mentioned this, a little better coverage within the field. I see too many holes. I'd like to figure out how to get past that. And I'm wondering, as I looked at yours today and then listening to everybody else, is maybe we need to put a couple more species out there to start seeing what. Because not every soil is looking for something. And we might not be hitting on, because like on mine, there wasn't one clover come up in my farm, not one clover. So it's like, well, and I always have trouble getting clover to grow. So maybe I need something to supplement, besides that. Or so what species do you need for your companion? I think that's going to kind of change. Well, not much, but everybody's be a little different.
Anything else anybody wants to share that you've learned through this experience that you think others could benefit from?
Whether it's no-till on the plains, I appreciate your guys' leadership in putting this network and applying for this grant and the funding that allowed us to take this risk on our farms to learn and how to continue to move forward in this conservation work. And I think it's those types of opportunities to learn and not worry about mistakes or big errors without financial risk are really important to farmers right now. So whether it's No-Till on the Plains and other organizations that maybe will follow the lead and put projects like this together that are replicated across the state using some of this grant money is a big value to producers.
The one thing that I'm seeing is I don't think we're pushing hard enough. I'm surprised pleasantly that where these companions are at, as far as I can tell, until we harvest, I've seen no harm at all yet. And that's the reason I'm saying maybe we need more of those to fill those holes in. I am like, I can't believe how dry we are and everything's growing so good. It's unbelievable.
Well, and I know we all get kind of in a routine of doing our own thing, and I'm just as guilty as the next guy. I mean, but I think it's important that we try different things on our own farms, and we come to these meetings and share that information. And if it's something as simple, it don't have to be a big replicated plot. If it's you got a little clover seed left over or something, and you go spread it out there by hand in an area and put a flag and go check it out. I just encourage everybody to explore on their own farm and try to do things they think won't work or going to fail. Maybe sometimes too, if we don't have a few failures, we're not trying hard enough to learn and understand. So certainly encourage others excited to be part of this project.